Namaste and greetings. I, Subhya Moin, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, प्रभाव एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान नई दिल्ली, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI Web Policy Talk. We are gathered today for a panel discussion on the topic Education and the Union Budget 2023 to 24. This discussion is organized by the Center for ICT for Development as a part of IMPRI Web Policy Talk series, The State of Education, #Education Dialogue. This discussion is a part of IMPRI's third annual series of thematic deliberations and analysis of Union Budget of fiscal year 2023 to 24, being organized from February 2 to 7, 2023. I welcome all of you to this enlightening deliberation and thank you for tuning into this discussion. Our chair and moderator for today's session is Professor Sachidanand Sinha, retired professor, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and visiting professor, IMPRI. We welcome you, sir. The panelists for today are Professor Mona Khare, Professor and Head, Department of Educational Finance, National Institute of Educational Planning and Administration, NIEPA, New Delhi. Dr. Y. Suresh Reddy, Director, SRF Foundation, Gurgaon. Professor Saumen Chattopadhyay, Professor and Chairperson, Zakir Husain Center for Educational Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Dr. Protiva Kundu, Thematic Lead, Social Sectors, Center for Budget and Governance Accountability, New Delhi. And Advocate Anubha Srivastava Sahai, President, India-wide Parents Association, lawyer and child rights activist. We welcome all the panelists. To initiate the deliberation, I would like to mention the key highlights for the educational sector in this fiscal year's budget. As announced by the Finance Minister, the total allocation for education for the fiscal year 2023 to 24 has been increased from 1,12,899 crores from the revised estimates of 2023 to 24, 2022 to 23 of 99,881 crores. The National Digital Library, which was announced in the previous budget, will be expanded to provide learning resources for children and adolescents as well. Furthermore, the Finance Minister also announced the opening up of physical libraries at Panchayat level to provide the necessary infrastructure to provide access to the National Digital Library. Collaborations with NGOs promoting literacy to promote financial literacy was also announced, with financial sector regulators to be encouraged to provide age-appropriate reading material to the libraries. Teachers' training will be re-envisioned through innovative pedagogy, curriculum transaction, continuous professional development, etc., through district institutes of education and training, and 100 laboratories in engineering institutes for developing applications using 5G services is supposed to be set up. Focusing majorly on tribal societies, the Finance Minister also announced that the government will recruit 38,800 teachers and staff for existing 740 Eklavya model residential schools serving 3.5 lakh tribal students across the country. Now, without any further ado, let us start the deliberation. It is my honor to invite Professor Sachidanand Sinha to start the program. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm extremely sorry for the delay, and that was caused because I was unable to connect the Zoom platform. In fact, when we are looking at the budget for 23-24, and the experience that we have had, especially in the education sector, both in the school and the university college sector, is that due to the pandemic, there has been tremendous amount of distress that was caused both at the level of learning, particularly among certain segments of India's population in the rural areas, in the remote areas, and so on and so forth. Now, it's a very encouraging thing to see that there is that this year one of the most important aspects which really needed to be talked about is that the quality parameters and quality of teaching. And there, I think, there is some impetus that has moved in the direction of having new teachers appointed, the teachers training program to be maybe, reorganized at the district centers through their DIAS institutes. And we got to really look at as to what is the condition of the DIAS Institute, whether these DIAS have, especially in the last 7, 8, 10 years, because it's a progressive idea of how teachers training has shaped up in this country, would perhaps, look at the quality parameters, which in fact is one of the most important aspect which has been highlighted in the NEP 2020. There is a talk, there is a mention that, they would like, the budget would like to continue its effort towards reaching out to the interior areas, especially in the Northeast and among the tribal population, which in fact seems to be visible. It's not very clear as to what is the allocation, which in fact, as pointed out, that, there is an increase in the allocation. If you look into the pattern of expenditure, then whether, this will be utilized to the extent, we have the provisions in the budgetary framework. One of the interesting aspects is that, the budget has paid attention on encouraging youth. Apprenticeship promotion scheme will continue. The Samagra Shiksha from preschool up to the class 12th would be encouraged and would be strengthened further. But then there are many questions, which I think, arises out of the provisioning, because there is not much that is visible in terms of, again, restating the same thing off and on. I think, the panelists here who have really done a finer reading of the budget and the Prime Minister's speech have gone through the economic survey meticulously, would have something to add. So since it's a question on the education budget, can I therefore take the freedom of inviting Dr. Pratima Kundu to in fact present us a comprehensive picture of where is the money going to come from, and where it's going to be spent, and which are the areas, especially in the school sector. Because, if I see that the school sector has two important, I would say, challenges that the school sector, particularly in the rural areas, are facing. One is that, following the NEP 2020, there is rationalization in terms of teachers' allocation. The schools where you have less than 10 students enrolled are being closed down. So that's also part and parcel of the scheme. We really do not know as to what is the regional distribution or statewide distribution of these schools which are being closed down. Of course, most of these are in the interior areas where you have the tribal or maybe, difficult terrain conditions, forested areas, and so on and so forth. We shall come to that at a later stage. But, if you look at the DIAS data, then UDAS makes it very clear that there is a decline in the total number of schools, by about certain order. I really don't remember the figure. At the regional level, we have reports coming from here and there. I'm told that in Delhi also nearly 200 schools are going to be closed down. Same is the story from Jharkhand, which in fact, that's an old story, where 40,000 schools, as reportedly from newspapers, were closed down. And in place of that, you have some, model schools being promoted. So let's see as to how all these provisions will perhaps, shape the education sector in the next few years from Pratima Kundu. So sorry for having taken longer than the time that was allotted to Pratima.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I'm Pratibha, not Pratima.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's fine. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so
yeah. Thank you. So, I mean, whenever any education budget getting prepared, three things I think should be kept in mind. One is, of course, the analysis of the current socio-economic situation. Then the second thing is, what is the scenario likely to prevail in the coming years? And the third thing, the education budget should give some direction, what is going to happen in the future. So this time when we listen the budget speech, the last part, that is the giving the direction to the sector in the long run, which was coming out from the speech. There are 7 priority areas identified. And the 7 priority areas, actually, if we can think very closely to the priority areas, it's basically everything. It's starting from inclusive development to reaching out to the last mile to giving, for youth development. So every aspects were there. But the other 2 components, like what is an analysis of the current socio-economic situation, the perspective from where the education budget should come, and the coming years, the scenario, that needs to be looked more in terms of looking at the deeper in the data. Here I will focus on school education as you suggested. Now, if we look at the size of our school education, there are around 15 lakh schools, around 27 crore students, more than 95 lakh teachers. So to serve this vast sector, there is we got a budget of around 66,000 crore for the Department of School Education. And now it is 8% increase. That is basically an incremental budget. But now the question is, whatever the around 5,000 crore has been increased from the previous year, the question is, what are the priority areas where this money have been spent? And a very, very closer look at the this additional allocation, if we see, then one thing coming out, the additional money is going for Kendriya Vidyalaya, Navodaya Vidyalaya, and PM Sri, which is basically a new scheme introduced in the last year, 2022 in September, which is basically kind of exemplar schools, which will, the purpose is to the national education policy. These would be some kind of guiding schools which will implement the national education policy, and that would be followed at the state and different levels of governance. So the priority is more towards this exclusive kind of model schools. These are all central government model schools. And now, how many students they cater? But these 3 schools together, it caters to 21 lakh or 20 lakh students. But as I mentioned already, that the size of the school education sector, if we even think about the government schools, there is more than 15 crore students in the government schools. So to serve this number of children, there is basically a key scheme, that is Samagra Shiksha Abhijan. So now need to look at what is happening under Samagra Shiksha Abhijan. We have seen from the last year, 70 crore additional budget has been given to this particular scheme. Now, what are the responsibility? What are the provisionings coming from Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan? It's everything. It's everything. It's a holistic school education. Basically, the provisioning of school education totally is coming from Samagra Shiksha, whether it's teacher education, whether it's infrastructure building, and teachers training. I mean, teachers inspection, monitoring. So every aspect is coming from Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan. Now, this year or from the last 2 years, under Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, which basically now has been seen as the vehicle for the NEP, which is basically talking about universal access from pre-primary to higher secondary level of education, and for central government, union government, this is the vehicle. The focus is now more on foundational literacy and numeracy, and that should be the case. Because the last few years, during the COVID experience, it has been seen from different services, whether it's as ASA service, whether it's National Achievement Service, we have seen that the basic reading ability or mathematical skill has deteriorated for all children, whether all starting from class 1 to class 12, and for government schools or private schools. So a focus for foundational literacy and numeracy is important, and NEP has rightly pointed out that the rest of the policy will become relevant only when this particular component of the education is we are first achieve this component, then probably the rest of the school education will be meaningful, and that's why. And there are many more suggestions related to foundational literacy and numeracy, like co-locating Anganwadi centers with the primary section. Then the strengthening there should be pre-primary sections in all government schools. The kind of teachers required for basically this improving basic skills and foundation schools, that is different from any other classes. So this kind of recommendations are there in the national education policy. But in the last 2 years, the pre-COVID period, that is 19-20 and now 21-22, if we look at the DICE data, as sir you were mentioning, around 20,000 schools have been closed. Then especially the pre-primary level, there is 7,000 teachers, the number of teachers declining by 7,000 in the pre-primary level. Already there is at the elementary level, means class 1 to 8, already there are 5.6 lakh teachers vacancy. Positions are vacant, and only in Bihar and UP the number is more than 3 lakh. So in this scenario, which is where we are basically struggling with basic inputs like teacher, infrastructure, it was expected that more resources would be required. And now when the normalcy is getting restored, the last 2 years there was not much spending happened, and also there was need for more. But this only 70 crore increase in Samagra Shiksha I think it seems it's quite inadequate. And the other thing is, if we have noticed, there is one announcement in the budget that the government is going to will go for result-based financing or performance-based financing for select schemes. Of course, it hasn't mentioned that which are the schemes government is going to take. But suppose in any of the education schemes have been chosen for this purpose, and given the present scenario, this result-based financing will actually end up in, the situation will be much worse, because we are not prepared. Outcome orientation is required, but now linking outcome with financing, we are not in that stage. So that needs to be think about. The other very important portion is teachers' education that you have mentioned. And there is, it's good that budget is talking about that. There should be teachers training, diet should be promoted, diet should be presented as Center of Institute of Excellence. This has been talked about. But in the overall Samagra Shiksha budget, only 2% goes for teacher education. Earlier, when in 2018-19, the all the teacher component, whether pre-service or teachers in-service education, has been brought under Samagra Shiksha with the with an assumption that it will give a holistic picture. But before the Samagra Shiksha one came into existence, the teacher education expenditure was bit higher, but after coming the whole teacher education under Samagra Shiksha, there is not much improvement. Only 2% budget goes for Samagra Shiksha. And the other important thing here to mention, that recently there is revamping of the Samagra Shiksha guideline, and the guideline is now talking about teachers training, or in-service teachers training should be in a blended mode, a 10 days teachers training, and should be in a blended mode, and at least 5 days of which will be online. This has been mentioned in the revised guideline. Now, I have reservation, and of course there is so much debate regarding the online teachers training teachers education or teachers training program. But what we have seen actually in the Samagra Shiksha, when the annual work plan and budget was getting prepared, so many of the many of the states actually asked for a physical training for 5 or 6 days, but all the project approval board for all the states, they actually approved unit cost only for online teacher training. So even if states are asking also, that is not happening. Then the other component in the whole education, school education gamut, as I was mentioning, that the taking note of the present socio-economic situation. Last time we have seen, and here comes the question of digitization of education. Last time we have seen that at last 2 years, that how the accessing of devices, accessing of internet, these were challenge for students, and that has to some extent impact their access to education. I'm not talking about here learning. It's only I'm talking about access to education. Now, when they're coming back to schools, if we see that even though the whole budget, so much emphasis is on digitization, there is talking about smart class, ICT lab, etc., or digital library, but just few statistics from you guys. So the basic thing, only 67% schools in India have functional electricity connection, and it ranges from 25% in Manipur to 100% in Delhi. Then around 16% schools have any kind of digital, desktop or any kind of computer. 5%, 1%, 1.2% government schools have digital libraries. 5%, and then 40% teachers are actually able to have some kind of training to how to use computer, and how they can provide computer training. This kind of knowledge have only 40% teachers have that. And in this kind of digital infrastructure, when we have so too much pushing for digitization, I don't think we are ready yet. Role of technology is very important. NEP is talking about that, but now we can use this effectively more for the administrative purpose, like allowing to take over all those mundane tasks that teachers are doing. That can be done so that teachers can get more time for teaching. That could be used for improving the school attendance. Then some additional engagement in through some interesting pedagogy, then assessment outcome. For all this purpose, the technology can be used, but still we are not ready for this. And whatever we have seen for the last few years, what additional allocation, what is going through Samagra Shiksha is largely for this kind of interventions. And the last point that I want to mention here, we are talking about reaching last mile. We are talking about no one leaves behind. So scholarships is one of the very important enabler in the whole process. And if we look at the scholarship story for the last few months, at least there is so much debate, because the scholarship for pre-matric scholarship for minority students, or children engaged with the other kind of hazardous occupation, parents of children, the class 1 to 8, this stretch from the pre-matric scholarship, that has been taken off from the, from the pre-matric scholarship. Those who are asking for money, scholarship for starting at class 1 to 8, they are not going to get any further this scholarship. It will be now only for class 9 and 10. And the logic has been given that since elementary education is free and because of RT, it's government's obligation, so there is no need for scholarship. But even if we look at the National Sample Survey data, in government schools, any child who is going to government schools, they need to spend around 1,000 or 1,200 rupees per child per annum at the primary level, and 2,000 per child per annum at the upper primary level. And for poor or marginalized communities who are very much dependent on public provisioning, and this dependence has increased to a larger extent after this COVID scenario, there are so many things like schools are giving uniform and textbooks, but other than that, there are so many, they don't give copy, they don't give pencils. Very basic things are required. So this kind of support is really important, and especially for the Muslim minorities, where the dropout rate is quite high compared to any other category of students. So this particular scholarship was so important, or because this is kind of support that is required to bring them in the level playing field. So in this situation, I think that there could, more could have been done for the school education or social education sector, because all the 7 pillars of these 7 pillars, like inclusive development, reaching last mile, or potential, the unpacking the potential of youth development, all are very much connected with education. So if we are not spending on school education, the basic, and then it will affect higher education. And finally, the larger goal in that sense, education is now being seen as human capital, preparing a set of skilled skilled labor force, and then that will be impacted. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Pratibha. I'm so sorry because of my bifocal lens. Sometimes I'm not in a position to read the names properly, and well, I know you are Pratibha. So I would now invite Professor Saumen Chattopadhyay, my friend, to reflect on higher education, or maybe, reflect on any aspect on which, we are debating at the moment. But of course, we would like to hear more on higher education from you. So the floor is yours, Professor Saumen.
Thank you, Professor Sinha, and thank you, IMPRI, or June in particular. I will be very brief, Sochida. Okay. Now, in order to understand the budget, let me set the context very briefly in the beginning. For higher education, the target, the gross enrollment ratio, the target is 50% by 2030, and 50% of them should have exposure to vocational education by 2025, which is very difficult, I suppose. But it shows how much importance is being given to vocationalization of education. Now, when you're looking at the budget, there are 2-3 very important things. One, how much importance are we giving to education or higher education compared to all other sectors? Number 2, when you're looking at the budgetary allocation within the education budget, it reflects the priorities being revisited by the government under different sectors. And when we compare the budgetary estimate with the revised estimate, 22-23, we also get an idea how the government is giving importance, how much importance that the government is giving to each of these, and how the government is looking forward to the future. It's a revisit and the absorptive capacity of that particular sector as well. Now, the discussion about digitization, Pratibha ended with the essence of NEP. The way I understand it, that digitization is very, very crucial for education reform for the government. Number one, that when we are trying to raise the enrollment ratio from the existing 30% to 50% in the next 7-8 years, digitization means, Pratibha also indicated, that the average cost falls. So the budget for education would not commensurately grow with the rise in the enrollment ratio. The other narrative, the other argument for digitization is that the quality of education can be replicated because all the platforms, Saumen and other e-platforms, would be able to replicate the quality because it's a digital product. Teaching is a service, but the teaching becomes a digital product if the lectures or the teaching within the time period allotted to the teacher are digitally recorded, and so therefore it can be replicated again and again. The third argument for digitization is that it can reach out to the remotest part of the country with very little cost. So the access would improve and the quality can be taken all to all the remotest part of the country. Now, given this context, let me look at the budget. For higher education, there are three major components. One is the central sector schemes or projects, and then you have got the central sector expenditure, and then you have got the transfer. So projects, central sector expenditure, and transfer. This is how I look at this is what I read from the higher education budget. When you're looking at the central sector scheme, the rise, I'm not going into the individual component, the overall rise is to the tune of 12.5%. Now, this 12.5% or an increase of around 550 crore is basically because of the National Apprenticeship Training Scheme. 440 is the increase in the budget. This is the new scheme. So under all other schemes, the budget does not show much of an increase other than world-class university. I will come to world-class university a little later. Now, the National Apprenticeship Scheme, what I understand, that we are trying to link the MSME with the skill development. So when we talk about the skill development, whether there will be a need for skill development, on the other hand, we are talking about MSMEs are not doing well. They're suffering because of the technology and lack of availability of the skilled manpower. So what the government is trying to do is to link the MSME, which would constitute a huge chunk of our industry and a significant proportion of our employment, with the new youths who are entering the job market. So give them skill, let them be entrepreneur, let them get absorbed in the MSME, let them contribute. So the demand supply gap is somehow being sought to be achieved by looking at this apprenticeship. That means let there be a supply, let us help the MSME, let them absorb the newly skilled trained personnel. So there is possibly, so this scheme apparently, seems to be quite good in implementation, and what would be the future, I can't say, nobody can say right at this moment, but it's apparently well conceptualized. Now, out of central sector scheme, there is a significant rise in the budgetary allocation for the world-class university. For 22-23, that is this year, the budgetary estimate was 1,700 crore, but the entire amount is unlikely to be spent. So it's going to be 1,200 crore. But for the 23-24, it is around 1,500 crore. And this is meant for the select group of institutions of eminence, mostly public and private 10+10, but mostly it is public. Student financial aid, the rise is around 7.77 crore, 77%. That means there is also, comparatively speaking, a little bit more increase for the student financial aid. And that also goes with the overall approach to education reform, that you give, you provide necessary help to the student, let them pay the fees, let them take loan and be self-responsible. Now, I'm now coming to the other central sector scheme. Central sector scheme, the overall budgetary allocation is only 4.33%. That means we are not even allowing for a real increase in real terms after accounting for inflation. 4.33 is a very insignificant increase, just barely minimum to keep things going. Even that would also not be sufficient if we are going for the allocation. If we are going to account for the inflation. Out of this central sector scheme, UGC, the future is uncertain for UGC. The UGC is going to get revised over budgetary, is around 4.5%. Central universities, 4.8%. AICT, the budget remains the same. For IITs, IISER, the increase is around 3 to 4% again, because the overall increase is around 4.33%. So for IITs and all, barely, not much of an increase. When it comes to the RUSA, the last year, the budget was, the budgeted amount was more than 2,000 crore, but only 360 could be spent because we are possibly coming out of the Omicron and there were not many applications received from the state government. But this year, we are going to, the 1,500 crore has been budgeted for. So the overall impression that I get from the budget is something like this, that first, let the individual and the institutions borrow and spend, and for the institution, let them borrow and invest. Because Higher Education Financing Agency has prominently featured in the budget now this time, if I compare to the last year, the interest component and the principal repayment component. That means the government is giving a very clear signal that we are going to support you for your day-to-day necessary maintenance revenue kind of expenditure. If you want to invest, if you want to compete in the newly emerging market kind of setup, please borrow and then spend. The inevitable impact would be on the fee rise. The second, of course, is the skill that is going to happen because it is already set up in this. And for the skill, also there are regulatory provisions that there would be seamless mobility between the general and the vocational education. National credit framework is going to be implemented. That will usher in a very, very major change in the way our formal education system is viewed, is understood, is going to be reformed, transformed vis-a-vis the non-formal sector. It's going to be a massive change, but the government has taken the initiative, but no mention in the budget because it's already the NEP has been accepted by the cabinet, so the implementation will continue to take place. So when you are spending on world-class university and the rest of the sector are not going to get enough fund. Now here we must keep in mind the education is in the concurrent list, center and the state, and therefore we have enough reason to doubt whether the state government, particularly those who are suffering the most, will be able to dedicate enough resources. And so the regional disparities, the state union disparities in terms of the allocation for the education is going to be more and more acute. So let me stop here, but the essence is that the focus on skill, the focus on raising the tuition fee to finance expenditure, you borrow and invest, and for the individual, you also borrow and fund your education, and the thrust on vocational education. For the technology, not much of an increase. Research innovation, again, not much of an increase, very, very nominal increase. In fact, for research innovation, there is no increase at all. Compared to the budgetary estimate for this year, 218 to 210, there's a decrease in fact. And for the e-learning also, there is barely any increase. Virtually the budget remains the same. So there's not much increase on digitization, but you utilize the existing resources and get ahead and compete with the foreign universities or the edtech companies. They have already started, edtech companies are already there in the market. And I don't know about the foreign universities. Let me stop here.
Thank you, Professor Saumen. But before we open your two presentations, Pratibha and Saumen, you have laid the necessary outline and delved deeper into some of the aspects, which were extremely important. Let's now, has Professor Mona Khare joined, or if she's there, okay, please, yeah.
Yes,
I would welcome Professor Mona now to make her presentation. Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. And sorry for joining in a little late, but I could at least hear part of Pratibha's talk and also Professor Saumen's enlightening analysis of the current budget in the higher education sector. I will try not to repeat what my earlier speakers have already spoken, and I fully agree with them on all those counts. Now, when we look at the budget, the first thing that comes to one's mind is that when India is claiming to be one of the reasonably faster growing economies in the developing group post the pandemic, and when the budget claims to have given a substantive boost to capital expenditure, how much of that is going to flow to the education sector? My earlier speakers have very rightly said that whenever we start looking at the budgets, we either look at the percentage shares of certain indicators which are flowing to the education sector in terms of relative to the GDP, or maybe relative to other sectors, or relative to the total expenditures or total budgetary allocation that has been done. Now, in all these terms, of course, for the first time, we can feel very happy, and almost every newspaper headline is saying so, that the total allocation to education has been highest ever. But the sorry state of affairs is we are certainly very much away from our 6% of GDP norm, but also from the past almost 5 years now, we are stuck at 2.9. We were somewhere around 3.5, 3.65, and even 4% of our GDP. So that is a major concern. Also, when we dissect the budget a little more, and we look at the proportion of the budgetary allocation which has gone to education as compared to the previous year, there is a marginal drop in it. It was around 2.9% last time, and this time it has come down to somewhere 2.56 or 2.6. So that very well shows the tall claims of the allocation for education being highest ever may not be so very heartening for us. Also, as my earlier speakers have already highlighted a number of issues in the education sector which we are facing. But as this budget is also claimed to be youth oriented, a budget which is looking at skilling, digitization, research, and innovation, certainly there is a lot of talk in terms of new schemes, new investments which are going to be made in opening of new institutions. Or for example, there is a talk about opening of 30 skilling centers, a lot of new schemes in terms of AI and big data 4.0, 100 labs to be opened in engineering colleges, the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana for 4.0 skilling of the youth. There is a lot of emphasis on increasing investment in medical education when it comes to opening new nursing colleges, So there is a lot of focus in terms of high-end sector within the education sector. Also, when we look at like Professor Saumen was looking at the bifurcation of the center sector allocations, or the Pratibha was talking about the Samagri Shiksha Abhiyan, where these are the centrally sponsored schemes. In both these, one finds that there at least is some element of investments which are being increased in elite institutions or technology and professional education kind of institutions. So you see some degree of increase in terms of IITs. Of course, IIMs have lost the race this time, but engineering, technology, medical, nursing, these are the sectors within education which have found some degree of importance. Although we are talking a lot about higher education vocationalization, which was kind of the major crux in the national education policy as well, but there seems to be little continuity in terms of the announcements or the recommendations which were made in the national education policy in terms of opening multidisciplinary universities, research universities, in terms of the spokes model, which was given a lot of emphasis in the previous budget, but none of them kind of find any place over here. Also, we all know very well that uh, all these years, the revenue component of the expenditure has been the overwhelming component in our budget expenditures. Today, when we are talking about a 33% increase in the capital expenditures, but for the education sector, now we are solely dependent on HIFA. And unfortunately, in this budget, there has been hardly any talk about HEFA. In fact, in the last year's budget also, HEFA hardly got a lakh of allocation as against 1 crore in the year prior to that. So there was a distinct fall in the HEFA allocations which were made in the previous years, and this year it doesn't find a place at all in the budgetary announcements. So has the government assumed that in the higher education sector, we have already reached a certain threshold of good quality infrastructure? Or is it that we are now leaving our public institutions of learning just to the markets? Because as it is, the government has announced that all the public institutions need to somehow manage at least 30% of their expenditures on their own. So is it so that the government is kind of withdrawing completely, slowly and slowly? One can very clearly see that the focus has moved to the technology and medical sector, but there is hardly any talk about the social sciences and the humanities sector, which comprises the majority of our student population. The third point that I would like to draw attention is on the national education policy had talked very vociferously about inclusion and equity. In fact, the gambit of SEDGs, the socioeconomically disadvantaged groups, was expanded and broadened to include not just the students from different identities, but also for the first time the transgender and also gifted children. Of course, the disabled were also to be given focus. But again, in this budget, nothing has been talked about this group of children or any new schemes or any increase in the existing schemes to include the children of this group in the higher education sector. Certainly, there is a talk about the Eklavya schools at the school level, and there too, a lot of emphasis has been given on teacher recruitment and teachers' professional development. Nothing per se on teachers' recruitment and professional development at the higher education level, because that also is a pain point in the Indian higher education system. The third point that I might like to highlight is with respect to the nutritional aspect of the children, and also the very fact that now the early childhood care and education is also a part of formal education system. But the budget has not actually tried to even touch upon that aspect. Of course, there is a marginal increase in the midday meal scheme, which is now known as the PM Poshan Ahar Yojana. But that too, if you compare with the revised estimates, the allocation has fallen as compared to the revised estimates of the previous year. Uh, the next aspect that I might like to draw the attention of the learned gathering over here is the national education policy had clearly said that investments in education should be a joint responsibility and collective responsibility, and all other major stakeholders also need to now be part of this whole process. Now, if we look at that part, it is only 2% of our companies that are investing in any kind of education activity in their CSR. Uh, uh, Although all the companies are supposed to at least invest 2% of their profits under the CSR, but only 2% of the companies are doing so for the educational activities. From a very long time, this has been something which has been brought to light by the researchers, which have now on and off been the content of some newspaper articles. But little has the government ever thought of tapping this pool of resources, which could be a major jump in the total funding that may be available to the education sector. Um, Also, as far as the digitization part is concerned, there is a lot of emphasis on how um, technology may be made use of. Also, there's a lot of emphasis on research in AI, so centers of excellence to be opened in the artificial intelligence, etc., looking at the kind of skills demand which are going to come in future with the technology oriented growth and technology oriented production processes becoming more intense. But when you look at the budget which has been made available, again one finds that there is hardly any increase for the digitization process also. um, um, Also, when you come to the teachers training part, it is a welcome thing that the government has thought about revamping the diets. Uh, but what about revamping the huge network of universities and colleges which have been existing in the country? There is hardly any talk about how the colleges and universities, the state universities per se, what kind of promotions can be made in terms of bringing the rural and remote institutions in the ambit of any kind of e-technology, e-progress, or in terms of these kind of high skill oriented courses, which certainly are going to remain again concentrated only in the urban centers and elite institutions of learning. So on and all, when we look at the budget, there may be emphasis on skills, on research and innovation, on digitization. But when it comes to making monetary provisions for even these components, one sees either there has been a drop, or there has been a marginal increase, or there has been a skewed kind of an allocation to certain elite institutions and not to the majority. In the research and innovation also, if you see the amount that has gone, a major proportion of it is to the research innovation fund, national research fund that the government has announced in the National Education Policy 2020. So a major portion only goes to that fund. How that fund will unfold itself, how it is going to get distributed at the lower levels, is all in the dark as of now. Another, and this is going to my last for now, uh, is with respect to the underutilization of funds under various schemes, which has come to light. If you look um, uh, at the budgets and the expenditure outcome expenditures of the previous year, one finds that there is a lot of underutilization under various schemes, and some of the insiders have also said that this may be one of the major reasons as to why under certain components there could not be any increase in the allocation for this period already, although it was very much required and important. So two very important observations that one can make is there has to be some kind of a balance when it comes to allocating resources in continuity and in line with the national education policy recommendations as to how we are going to be able to take them forward, instead of just announcing new schemes or making some new announcements in terms of opening new institutions, etc. And also there has to be a greater degree of emphasis to be given to efficient utilization and also accountability towards the funds which have been allocated. Because as we are moving more towards the performance based education paradigm, it will become increasingly important that efficient utilization and accountability towards the funds will become the major parameter for receiving funding for the next year. So that becomes an important dimension when we are analyzing the budgets. Uh, on that note, maybe I'll stop for now, and if we have more questions to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Khare, for your very insightful probe on some of the provisions of the budget. So what emerges from the three presentations, just a brief review, is that the school segment, the emphasis is somewhat lopsided. Can I say that? Because much of and that also emerges from what Professor Saumen presented, that much of the school segment or maybe education segment is certainly with the state governments. So how does the allocations made by the central government would dovetail with the state government's provisioning, and therefore what would be the impact on the school sector, particularly the teachers training? And that's very important that we all know the conditions of the diets. And I think, there is a lot that needs to be done. And in terms of tribal students or tribal population getting the emphasis in terms of the Eklavya model residential schools, 740 of them impacting 3.5 lakh tribal children, with 38,000 or 39,000 teachers to be appointed. How does this go with yet another announcement, which is part of the PM3, where 14,500 schools of top-notch schools will be created, which will be impacting 20 lakh students. If we look into just simple arithmetic, then it appears that while the Eklavya model school, residential schools, these 740 of them, impacting 3.5 lakh tribal students, there is one school for every 473 children, if we go by this number. And in case of the PM Shri school, there is one school for 140 children of this category. Does that really bring about some kind of notion of disparity or inequality? We talked about different dimensions of higher education, and appears that digitization, quality replication is going to be the key word. And of course, you have to borrow and study. And and of course, the universities and the colleges will have to mobilize their own resources. So higher education is all mostly going to be self-financed, if that's how things would emerge eventually. So can we take it for granted that the days of higher education, which was subsidized, is over? Because on the one hand, the colleges and universities are raising fees, they are restructuring their fee structures and so on and so forth. We have seen that happening even during the pandemic. The fees went up. And do we really think that this quality replication, because would really reach out or create greater access? Is quality just one standard kind of a presentation or a set of standard presentations that will really go about making for the quality education? And the last question that comes to my mind, and that is based on the experiences of the last few decades, is that India is one country where I keep saying this. We have all kinds of schools, even in the government sector. Now we have, not now, but a new kind of we have the Kendriya Vidyalayas, and we have this Vidyalaya and that Vidyalaya, army school, and Navodaya schools, and so on and so forth. All in the all government-funded schools, and now we have the PM Shri. And whenever we have had such kinds of new schooling, trend-setting, what Kothari said, pace-setting and trend-setting schools, and that is the model, which is being talked about again and again, that, the quality cannot be delivered by all, it has to be delivered only by a set of schools, and the others will have to wait for that, or maybe others will follow. If that is the perspective, then, it fits in within the class model or the unequal or iniquitous model of our social philosophy in India. But does it also, does the international experience also really talk about that? And so my question is, and I'm just wondering as to what happens when a new set of schools are opened up, or new institutions are, then the older ones are made to suffer. And this is what emerges from Professor Khare's, I mean, she did not say it in so many words, but I think that's one indication that one can get from what she was talking about. There is one segment of, and that's a major segment of India's population, which really doesn't find much of a mention in the budgetary text and the economic survey, and also in our discussion today is the girls' education, because that is what really suffered the most during the pandemic, especially in the school segment. And then what is their waiting in terms of what is there in the budget, which could perhaps the girls and the women who in fact really suffered the most. I mean, they were the ones who, I mean, I know of women students who in fact were staying and in some kind of an accommodation, had to vacate and they had to go back. There were implications of all kinds. Many of them were forced into marriages and so on and so forth. So, I mean, that's something, which certainly is not the question of the budget, but, but it's a larger, what Pratibha was saying was the socio-economic context has to be seen and it has to be really responded accordingly. So I think, if our panelists could also think on these lines. But we also have people from, we have members, distinguished members from the civil society. We have Anubhaji from the Parents Association, and she will bring in some perspectives. We have Dr. Suresh Reddy, and he would bring in some perspectives from the non-governmental organization as to how they would like to really respond to the budget. So over to you, Dr. Anubhaji, for your presentation and how you look at the budget.
Thank you, Dr. Professor Sinha, for having me here. And this is a very important discussion which we are doing today. And I think a lot of people will get to know what all is there in the budget. And as far as the budget is concerned, the primary focus last year also was on NEP. This year again, they're focusing on NEP. And basically NEP talks about 4 things, which is access, equity, and quality and accountability. So as far as access of education is concerned, I think as Professor Kundu has said, she has explained and she has also given the figures how the accessibility to education in primary sections, like in school education. First, I'll talk about school education. I think the more funds should be allocated. Until unless we have a good number of funds, sufficient funds for school education, I don't think we will be able to provide proper education, and we have to bring back children to school. There are many students, many children are now out of school because of the pandemic. We have to bring them back to the school. Until unless we will have sufficient funds, because the budget talks about allocating funds only especially for KB schools, for Navodayas and all other central government aided schools. But as far as state government aided schools are concerned, even private aided schools are concerned, I don't think much of the focus has been given to those aided institutions because they're not getting sufficient aids. We also talk about, Madam also talked about schools being shut down. And Professor Sinha, sir, you also have discussed that how so many schools have been shut down in Bihar, 40,000. Even in Maharashtra, around 25,000 schools have been shut down. So this is a very serious concern where the government has to focus. The government has to allocate more and more funds so that we can bring back those children to school. And those who are also facing a lot of problems, those who are particularly studying in the school from KG to PG, because now KG is also part of RTE. So as far as the implementation of RTE concerned, we need a lot of funds so that we can provide proper education to these children. And the most important thing is the teacher education, training of the teachers. Not much focus is being, although the budget talks about teacher training programs, no doubt. Even last year, I think I have heard that IGNOU was supposed to provide training to around 10,000 teachers. I don't know what happened to that. Implementation is happening or not on ground level. It is a very difficult, it is a very challenging task to find out whether the teachers are being properly trained or not. It's more than 3 years to NEP now. And until unless we have properly trained teachers, we will not be able to implement NEP. So more focus should be on teacher training. No doubt every year we talk about teacher training programs being initiated. But whether it is happening at ground level or not, this is a very serious thing which needs to be monitored. As far as the ITEP program also, I think this Education Minister talked about this ITEP program, that is Integrated Teacher Education Program. Now, around 45 institutions were supposed to impart that education to start that program. But I don't think whether that again happened or not. It's just on paper, and whether that has been implemented or not, that is also a very challenging task. As Professor Khare also talked about the implementation and whether the proper utilization of funds are happening or not. Underutilization of funds, she was talking about the underutilization of funds, which is a very serious concern. And we need to find out whether the funds which are being allocated maybe this year or even last year, whether the utilization of funds are happening at ground level or not. So that is a very important thing where the focus needs to be on teacher training, even if we will come up with lot many schools and colleges, but if we don't have proper teachers to train our children and students from KG to PG, then it will be very difficult to implement the NEP. So basically, aided school also, you're talking about that now the schools and colleges will have to function on their own. They will now into their self-finance mode. If aid will not be provided to the institutions, especially the aided universities, because many students in our country belong to lower middle class or from EWS category, most of the students. Maximum students are from EWS category. Hardly 5 or 10% children are from a wealthy family. So until unless aid will be provided to the institutions from KG to PG, be it universities or even private aided schools, I don't think that NEP will be properly implemented. If aid will not be provided, because there are so many universities across India in different states which are suffering because of the lack of funds. They have teachers, but they are not. The teachers recruitment is not happening in institutions, in schools and colleges also. So teachers are suffering. Even many professors, I'm in touch with a lot of professors where they tell me that they don't have proper teachers to train the students. We are talking about so many new schemes, dual program which the government is planning to start, dual degree program. How a student will learn two courses from two different universities until unless we have proper teachers to train these students. So I think until unless proper aid will be provided to these institutions from KG to PG, I don't think the implementation will happen. Lot of universities are now coming. Few days before, I was on a show with UGC chairman, and he was talking about some universities, foreign universities, which are going to come and invest in our country. They are going to start universities. Definitely, it's a good initiative, no doubt. But what about those universities which are already existing and are struggling to get aid from the government? So those universities will be shut down. So I think focus should be more on providing aid to all these universities, institutions, private aided schools. Until unless more aid will be provided, the self-finance schools will not survive. I know many aided schools which are being shut down. Same will happen to the universities which are aided. If they will convert into self-finance mode, I think students will not take admission only in these universities and institutions. So अगर हम लोग एक तरफ we are talking about teacher training program, but at the same time, if aid will not be provided, we will have sufficient teachers, but we won't be having those universities until unless aid will be provided. So major focus should be on aid. I think to provide aid to the institutions, the self-finance institutions also, I would say, not only private aided institutions, which are partly aided and partly their self-finance. Even 100% self-finance institutions should also be provided with some kind of aid so that students can learn education, can seek education at affordable fees. Because today the fees, parents are taking loan actually. Why we should take loan in a country like India, where we are paying tax more than 30%, more almost 50% tax we are paying to the government. And if we are paying 50% of tax, both direct and indirect, then I think government should invest. Even we are paying education cess also. I think government should invest more on education sector. Otherwise, there will be no use of this NEP on all these skill programs which the government is planning to start, because we will have more of unskilled population in the years to come. The students will not get proper education if the education is not affordable. I don't think, even today I face a lot of problem. I have studied in government school. I have studied in government college. The quality was very good when I was in school and college, and all those schools were aided, government schools. and college. Today, it is very difficult to get admission in government. First of all, we don't have proper government schools. Very few government schools are running. Most of them are being shut down. Same will happen with government universities also, aided universities. They'll be shut down because I don't think they'll be able to manage if on their own, as we are talking about if they will be converted to self-finance mode, then most of the new universities will shut down and students will struggle to get education even at UG and PG level. Today, you can see the fees of private medical education. It is unaffordable. 50 lakhs, 60 lakhs, 1 crore. It is so much that even a normal parent cannot think about sending the child or to a medical college, because most of the, there are hardly 90,000 seats. If we talk about NEET exam, which most of the students, around 19 to 20 lakh students appear per year. Every year, around 20 lakh students appear for this NEET exam. And out of those 20 lakh, we have only 1 lakh or 90,000 seats in government colleges. So just imagine, we should have at least 50% of seats in government institutions or even private institutions if aid will be provided. I think many of the private colleges and universities are going to reduce their fees. Mr. Modi talked about, our Honorable PM last year, I remember, he talked about reducing the fees of medical college to 50%. That has to be brought at par with the fees of the government institutions. But private institutions will not survive if the fees will be reduced and no aid will be provided. So it's a good concept, no doubt, good initiative by government, that where the Modi ji is talking about reducing the fees of 50% seats and to the fee should be at par with the government aided institutions. Until unless aid will be provided, I don't think this will happen. So education, as far as accessibility of education is concerned, about NEP, accessibility will not happen. Nobody will get access. Maximum 90 to 80% children from KG to PG will not get access until unless proper aid will be provided to the institutions right from KG to PG. Second is the equity, or we will call it fairness. If we see, as far as the education in rural sector is concerned, students who belonging from rural sector, I don't think they're having even proper access to the classrooms. You go and see the condition of government school or even private school. Very few private schools are there. Even government school condition is pathetic. So if we are talking about equity in NEP, then the equality has to be for all the students across India, be it from rural sector. If we are talking about digitization will not happen in the rural parts because we don't have proper electricity. So NEP, if the NEP talks about equity, then government needs to provide proper infrastructure to students from across all over India, not only in the urban sector, but in rural sector also. The focus should be there. No doubt, NEP, no doubt the budget talks about focusing more on rural sectors, but I don't know how the funds are being utilized. That is a very serious concern. Now, third is the quality of education, and fourth is the accountability. As far as quality of education is concerned, I have already discussed that if the proper training will not be provided to teachers, then I don't think they'll be able to impart good quality of education. If proper aid will not be provided to these institutions who are running on their own, even aided institutions are struggling today. If proper aid will not be provided, then even the quality will be degraded. They won't be paying much salary to the teachers, and then accretion rate will be very high. So again, quality also, NEP talks about quality, but budget, as far as the budget is concerned, budget is not matching with the NEP, basic concept of the NEP. And fourth is accountability. That is a very important aspect as far as the accountability is concerned, because even if budget will be more funds will be allocated in the education sector, until unless there will be accountability, until unless there will be proper monitoring of the utilization of funds, I don't think we'll be able to implement NEP as well as the budget. So accountability is very important. Let there be a monitoring committee. We can have a task force. Some state governments did talk about the task force. Let there be some task force to check the accountability to monitor the implementation of various schemes and also NEP. Unless we have proper monitoring committee, proper task force will be appointed, I don't think this implementation will take part. Because see, RTE came in place in 2010. It's almost more than 15 years now, 13 years now that the RTE is being implemented. But at ground, RTE has been enacted. But as far as the implementation is concerned, that is not happening. So that's why accountability is very important as far as the implementation of NEP and even the budget, utilization of budget is concerned. Now, important aspect which the focus which everybody talked about, a lot of things like training and all, PM Kushal Vikas Yojana 4.0, and then there is some Skill India international centers. There are around 30 Skill India international centers which are going to be started. There are a lot of things which are being talked about innovation and research, also for making India, make AI in India. That is also the major focus of the government. But as far as the budget allocation is concerned, I don't think proper focus has been given to all these areas, be it research and development or implementation of various other schemes. One more important thing is the 3.0 Skill India Internship Centers. There are National Apprenticeship Program, which Professor Sinha also talked about, the National Apprenticeship Program, where around 47 lakh youths are going to be trained in next 3 years to come. Now, I would like to give an example because I am dealing with a case of SBI apprenticeship. Now, around 27, initially when it started in 2019, around 8,000 apprentice notification was announced. An ad was there. The government announced that around 8,000 trainees will be provided training by SBI. So that happened, and later on those apprentices were recruited also. Later on in 2021, the number reduced from 8,000 to 2,200. Now around 2,200 apprentices have taken training in last year. And in 2000, that was in 2021, the announcement came, and for 1 year the program went ahead. But last year, no such program was announced. No such scheme was announced by SBI. I'm just giving an example of SBI apprenticeship program. There are several other schemes also, several other training programs also. But as far as the apprenticeship program of SBI is concerned, till now, no such scheme was announced. And those apprentices are struggling. They've approached me. I got to know a lot of things about this SBI apprenticeship program, where the trainees have not been provided proper training only. They are going, SBI is going to provide them a certificate that yes, you have completed 1 year of apprenticeship program. They're going to provide the certificate, but that also we have challenged in the court, that how can you provide a certificate without providing them proper training? So all these things, like if we are talking about providing training to around 47 lakh youth in next 3 years, what happened to all those trainees, all those students, all those apprentices in past 2 to 3 years? So if you are not providing proper training to these apprentices, if there will be no monitoring, proper monitoring, whether the apprenticeship program is properly implemented or not, what will be the use of all these things? So that's why monitoring is very important. If we are talking about a budget is talking about apprenticeship program of around 47 lakh youth in next 3 years, then there has to be a mechanism where the trainees, where the people who will be enrolled in this program should be able to file complaint, lodge complaint. There has to be some monitoring committee which needs to see whether all these schemes are being implemented or not. Because हम budget में तो बहुत बड़ी-बड़ी बातें करते हैं, but the proper major concern is the implementation, which is not happening. Be it for school education or education at college, be it for teacher training program. आपका IGNOU में, I don't know whether 10,000 teachers have been properly trained or not. मुझे नहीं पता, आप लोग, you are from JNU, so you would be knowing whether the 10,000 teachers have been properly trained or not. वो वो टीचर्स हैं कहाँ जिनको ट्रेनिंग की बात की गई थी लास्ट ईयर इन 2022. So basic thing is that yes, बहुत बड़ी बड़ी बातें होती है. That is a good thing that yes, government is focusing on education, no doubt. But as far as the implementation is concerned, until unless we will focus on implementation, I don't think we'll be able to bring change in our education sector, education system. That is a very serious concern. Now, 3-4 more important points I would like to highlight. One is the mental health programs. As far as the mental health is concerned, Mental Health Act is in place since 2015, but 17, but the same has not been yet implemented. And as a professor, sir, you would be knowing that how students are suffering in college as well as in school. Many students and many are committing suicide. 12th graders are committing suicide. Students who are appearing for NEET and JEE exams and other exams are also committing suicide. There are a lot of cases which are being reported even from coaching institutes. Many students in MBBS, those who are pursuing MBBS, they are also committing suicide. So there is lot emphasis has to be there on mental health. As far as the Mental Health Act is concerned, as far as the awareness among youth, awareness even among children is concerned, I think government needs to focus on Mental Health Act and also the implementation of that awareness and implementation of Mental Health Act. Unfortunately, there is no discussion. Even though discussion is there, but there is no proper aid being provided for implementation of this mental health scheme. Until unless this will happen, which is a very serious concern, I think government should focus more on this mental health aspect also, because a lot of students are into a lot of things because of mental stress. A lot of students, even school-going children, are taking drugs. That is a serious concern. So I think we should focus more on mental health aspect also. I keep talking about that, and we do a lot of shows, we do a lot of discussions on Mental Health Act implementation, but that is not happening at ground level. So that also needs to be focused as far as the budget is concerned. Education should focus, education budget should focus even on implementation of Mental Health Act. And another aspect is the gender sensitivity programs. At school level, I think that at school level, it is high time that we should focus on gender sensitivity programs, because many children, school-going children, small children, 10 to 12-year-old children, they don't know anything. So gender sensitivity program in school level is must, and focus should be there on training teachers, especially teaching and non-teaching, not only teachers, training teaching and non-teaching staff on gender sensitivity. That is a very serious concern, where the at school level, even the non-teaching staff are not aware about all these things. So once a training will be done, training will be provided for teaching and non-teaching staff. Even parents also require, parents and children require, but to train and to counsel those children, we need proper trainers, we need proper teaching and non-teaching staff. So gender sensitivity training programs in school level, at school level, especially for teaching and non-teaching staff is what I would suggest the government should focus more on that. And jab tak funds nahi honge to kuch nahi hoga, because government schools are shut down. Even universities ka bhi wahi hal hone wala hai. Most of the aided universities are not going to survive now. So until unless we have proper funds, I don't think all these schemes will be implemented at ground level. So that is another aspect where I would like to point out my. Now, another thing is the grievance redressal mechanism, which I would like to mention is the grievance redressal mechanism. I already talked about that. Monitoring is not happening, implementation is not happening, and a lot of students complain. A lot of students approach us that this is the problem which we are facing, and the grievance mechanism hai hi nahi, be it in school and college. Like recently from IIT Surat, triple IT Surat, some students approached me and they have shared me some pictures about the poor quality of the food, as well as even the poor quality of the hostel. Hostel is in a pathetic condition. In triple IT, which is an aided, partly aided, I think 80-20% is the ratio. the triple ITs also, even IITs, students from IIT Baroda have approached me and they're saying that we don't have proper place to even stay. So even though IIT Delhi, IIT Mumbai, these are the premier institutions where government is focusing, no doubt, but there are other IITs also where the students are struggling even to get proper accommodation. So that is not happening. I don't know what is the reason, whether the aid is being provided or not. We do talk about research and everything, that yeah, IIT may this year the budget is talking about some grant for IITs for research and development. No doubt, that is a good thing. But as far as the students are concerned, if proper environment will not be provided to these students, young students who are going to these institutions, I think they will suffer a lot, because mentally also they are very much depressed because of the condition, poor condition of the infrastructure, especially in these institutions. The infrastructure, we know how the infrastructure is there in government schools, and even if in institutions like IIT and triple IT, the infrastructure will not be provided properly. This fees is quite high. I think around 2 to 3 lakh per year. That is the fees, where hostel is compulsory, mess is compulsory, but the quality is not good. So government needs to focus on that also. So everything comes around again to the budget part, where the allocation is not being made properly. Until unless we have at least 6%, no, not 6%, I would say at least 5% of our GDP. Until unless that will be allocated, I don't think we'll be able to implement either NEP or any other schemes properly on ground. So these are some of my important points which I wanted to highlight. And another point is the SSA, triple SA, that is assessment of students, as well as the private and government schools. NEP talks about the assessment part of students as well as the schools, private and government both. So that is a very good thing. Yes, assessment is must as far as the schools are concerned. Even assessment of college is also very important, whether proper education is being imparted, proper training is being imparted or not. पढ़ाई वहाँ पे अच्छे से हो रही है नहीं हो रही है, because many university students approach me and they tell me that madam, in universities, many university students approach me and they tell me their problem, that how the classes are not being done properly, पढ़ाई नहीं हो रही है वहाँ पे, बच्चों का syllabus complete नहीं हुआ है, still exams are happening. So maybe that may be due to COVID. I can understand that now we have to bring back the academic session on track, but not at this pace where the students have to struggle. Even the syllabus is not complete, but exams are happening. So even assessment of schools as well as the universities is must. That should happen, not only of the students, but also of the school and college also, private and government both. So I would suggest that the government should focus on that. And if there is any monitoring committee which can be set up, though UGC is there, but I don't know whether they're properly doing the assessment part or not. So that is the major focus, which I think government should focus on all these aspects which I have discussed. And other things which I was planning to discuss already has been discussed by other panelists about midday meal scholarship. Yes, scholarship is also very important, where the Professor Kundu has highlighted that even though government is saying that RT is in place, that is right to free and compulsory education, so there is no need for a scholarship. But where are those government schools now? RT is mandatory even in private schools, but we don't have sufficient private schools. Schools are not getting aid only. Many schools told me that as far as the RT fund is concerned, they're not getting proper funds also. Many cases have been filed in High Court and Supreme Court. The schools are not getting funds.
No, we are running short of time.
Okay. So so sorry for this. And I would like to conclude now by saying this, yeah, implementation is very important on whatever our panelists have suggested, that budget should focus on all those things, and government should also provide more aid to all these institutions from KG to PG. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sahai, for your your concern on several aspects, which in fact other panelists did not mention. And I think, you know, these are all very important concerns to be placed as part and parcel of the budgetary allocations. You were absolutely right that, you know, accountability, access, all these questions, particularly on that you highlighted, more allocation for schools and colleges and for public funding in the context that India is and will continue to be in this kind of situation for years to come. And education has that role, which in fact is not just restricted to what we say is that, well, you know, the school education is the basic need, the basic education, and therefore, okay, we'll make it free. But the higher education is something, you know, that you choose for and you pay for it. So that's a kind of a consumption, and you must pay for your consumption. But, you know, this perspective of looking at education in this manner is all right for a certain kind of a discipline. But I think as a social scientist, I think that education is also a very, very important channel in a country like ours to give us social and economic mobility. And that mobility takes place only when we access higher education. And if higher education becomes so costly, which in fact all the panelists have been talking about, then, you know, it will become an exclusive domain of a certain class. Well, you know, we will continue with some of these questions, but let's listen to Dr. Reddy. Sorry, Dr. Reddy, for keeping you waiting for so long. I've been liberal with time because I'm retired. So, well, over to you, Professor Dr. Reddy.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor. Due to the paucity of the time, I will take the 5 to 6 minutes, you know, not more than that.
Professor, please take your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Please take.
To begin with, the one thing is that, you know, I accept
कोई समय का पाबंदी नहीं है, क्योंकि हमने किसी पे पाबंदी नहीं लगाई थी. हम पाबंदियों से दूर हैं. JNU से है ना?
Thank you, Professor. So to begin with that, you know, as Education Minister said that this is the highest ever budget allocation for education. So I agree with that in terms of the absolute numbers. So 1 crore 12 lakhs, 1 crore 12 lakhs crores of budget rupees is the highest number. No doubt on that. At the same time, there is a research as published by the PRS Legislative Research. What it has studied for last 1 decade, 2011 to 2011 to 12 to 2021-22. What it says that the Ministry of Education, the compound annual growth expenditure stands at 3.8% last decade, and as a ministry as a whole, when it comes to the Department of School Education, the compound annual growth rate of expenditure stands at 2%. And come to the Department of Higher Education, the compound annual growth of expenditure stands at 6%. If you see this last decade, how the expenditure is incurred by the Ministry of Education, so 3.8 at the ministry level, 2% at school education level, and 6% at higher education level. So it shows that how little was spent spent on school education compared to the higher education and compared to the overall ministry. That is one thing I want to highlight here. And also this compound annual growth rate in expenditure, which is much more less than inflation rate you're talking about, you know. So year on year basis, the inflation is increasing and the kind of thing, but actual spending is not even matching that. So that is the one issue. So whatever the number of budget you announce it for the nation, for the education, in absolute numbers, it's okay, fine, doing well. But in actual terms, you know, it is under budgeted to any components we're talking about. As being a sort of foundation, civil society organization, we have been working across 12 states, working with the government schools primarily. and addressing all the needs of schooling, either physical capacities or the academic capacities, leadership or digital. In all four aspects of the schooling, we try to address. In every aspect of the schooling, there's a huge deficit. So whatever the budget allocated now, I don't think so with this budget, so it stands both the center and the state together at 2.9% of the GDP together. And with this kind of budget allocation, it is insufficient to meet the needs of the schools. What Professor Pratibha told that we have the 15 lakh schools and 97 lakhs of the teachers and 27 crores of children. And whatever this budget allocation is the minuscule. I don't say that is a huge kind of thing. It just we are maintaining the status quo, but in real terms of the allocation is very less. At the same time, so one thing I want to highlight that the diet institutions talking about promoting the quality of education, revamping and remodeling the diet institutions. When diets were started way back in 1970s and 80s across the country, they are the innovative institutions at that point of time. During the DPEP and SSA at the time, they have attracted a lot of attention and to promote the quality of education training institutions. But last 10-15 years, they are just neglected totally. Now we are talking about reviving and remodeling and promoting kind of thing. So this is something a strategical, the mistake what we have been doing that and how to address this kind of issues. At the same time, the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan we're talking about. So the budget has increased, but Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, which is just increased only 0.18%. So 0.18% increase compared to last year budget, and how we are going to be the bottom of the pyramid talking about the school education, which is the very wide base. And with this minuscule of the 0.18%, how it is going to address the issue of the foundation literacy and numeracy we are talking about, right to education, preschool education, linking with the primary school education, how we are talking about. We're talking about the national education policy, So RT standards, national education policy, FRN, all these things, how we can address with increase of 0.18% with Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan of the budget allocation. That's a big issue. At the same time, PM Shri schools we're talking about an increase of 122%. 122% of increase of the budget. It is totally, it is centers of excellence, islands were created as fine as models kind of thing. So these models can be created by giving the opportunity to the either NGO sector or corporate sector, especially CSR budget, as I would like to highlight here. Annually, the CSR budget is coming to the countries around 25,000 crores, out of which 30% budget is going to the school education and skilling. So that means 6,000 to 7,000 crores of budget is coming from the corporate towards the education and skilling. So that is something there the corporate is contributing to the education system. That also need to be seen. If this kind of CSR contributions can be utilized for the because of creating the solutions for the educational transformation. So the government can replicate, scale it up the programs to the wide across the country and scalable, investing more money for that. That is one thing one can look at it. So then also I'm talking about the digital space we're talking about. In a digital space, when I say 15 lakh schools are there, if you want to leverage the technology advancement and kind of thing, schools require digital infra. Schools required internet connectivity. Schools required electricity connection. Schools required teachers' capabilities and kind of thing. So if the government can bring some policy change, for example, the GST now on the technology what we are procuring, it is a 28% GST on the IT infrastructure if you are procured. So if central government can announce that, if any infra we are going to be procuring for the either schools or colleges, for the students and teachers and institutions point of view, you can waive off the GST of 28%. That could be a big boon for the state governments and central government and the edtech companies and kind of thing. More money can come to the system and technology platform can be created. At the same time, the technology application talking about the e-content, we're going to create it. The e-content can be created. Again, here 18% of the GST is applicable. Any software applications we are purchasing, utilizing for the educational purpose. So there also when one can think of how can be GST can be reduced or eliminated kind of thing. These are the policy changes can we bring in, which can transform the education system across the country next to 4 to 5 years time, and we can fit with the 21st century education we're talking about. So every child, every student, every institute in the country, they can be equipped, digitally equipped, and they can be able to leverage the technological advancement. And during the COVID situation, these schools are the worst sufferers when compared to the high-end private schools, where everything was there taken care, the IT platform, all those things, whether at school level, at family level. But at the government school system, where the parents have the IT infrastructure, schools were shut down and their capacities are not there, the content was not available in regional languages, they suffered a lot. So this is one suggestion I know as a way forward. It's not about it is related to the budget allocation kind of thing, but it has positive implications, when you give some kind of reduction in the GST standards kind of thing. At the same time, we are talking about the National Digital Library. The government was suggesting it's a very good idea to actually to leverage, to give the access to the good books and literature and all those things for across the country, the people in different language kind of thing. To access this thing, government is suggesting that at panchayat level or ward level, you can create the physical libraries with the digital platforms kind of thing. So here there's no budget allocation for that, but how to make it happen. So here again, they say, so the government can look at it. If really government wants to leverage technology, but it has to look at it beyond the budget figures at a policy level, kind of some kind of incentives it can give in change. So at the same time, compared to higher education, the school education is not able to utilize the budget whatever is allocated. If you see, last year, 1,04,000 crores allocated education budget, and the revised estimation come to 99,800 crores of the budget is the revised budget estimations. So almost all 5,000 crores were revised downside. It happened in only school education sector, not in the higher education sector. So that means some schemes of the government even budget allocated, but because of the system process delay or not utilizing this kind of budgets for the though it is very scarce resources, but not fully utilized. So it has, because of that also the next year budget allocation will be reduced. So these also things need to be, one has to look at it, and when you talk about the budget allocation, the utilization, and also distributing among the various the departments. I stop it here. These are my few of my thoughts, and so over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Dr. Reddy, for bringing in yet another dimension. I think all the panelists have contributed in their own ways towards enlightening us on different issues. I think, there are many issues which I think they emerge from policy. And as we all know that there cannot be justice without policy. And if the policy looks at a certain kind of, if the policy is not dovetailed in a manner, then, the whole edifice that we try to create is likely to crumble down. So, therefore, I would now invite the organizers to, in fact, open the presentation for any kind of discussion. If there is, if there are questions from the audience sitting far and wide, and so that the panelists could respond to them.
Yes. Sir, we do not have any question as of yet, but why don't we go to each of the panelists if they have left anything?
Yeah, we'll go. I thought, let's have one round of
I will assist,
and then, yeah.
Sure.
So again, back to Pratibha, and if she would like to add something, or any Professor Khare, Professor Saumen, Anubaji.
So,
yeah. Yes, please Please go ahead.
So I was so glad when you referred to the gender aspect when nobody did touch upon it, although that was very much on my mind and it just slipped. But you know, when I was just giving a quick look at the gender budget, and I'm sure everyone knows here that gender budgeting has become mandatory now from 2004 onwards. So I was just giving a quick look at it, and to my utter dismay, for the higher education sector, in the component A of gender budgeting, which is supposed to be like 100% of that component, that allocation goes for women only. There's only one item in that, in which there is hardly
Monaji, your
any
voice is
allocation which
breaking.
has been
So
made.
maybe if
Going
you
to
could
part
repeat the
B of
last line.
where at least 30% of the, actually I'm traveling and joining from,
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that you are in a car. So, there could be
I'm
difficulties.
mobile, so
Yeah.
maybe there's some network issue. Am I clear now?
Yeah,
Hello?
you're much better now. Yeah, it's clear. It's clear.
Yes.
Yeah, if you switch off your
I'm
audio,
switching
maybe
off
video.
my video. Yeah, I'll switch off my video. Right. So what I was saying is, I was looking at the gender budget, and the first part of gender budget in which these schemes that are meant 100% for the women, there's only one item that has been placed, for which also the allocation is minuscule. And then when we look at part B of the gender budget, it has some couple of elements, some 5 or 6 heads under which allocations have been made. But to my utter dismay, when I compare to the previous years, there is nothing which has been given for girls' hostel in the higher education. Now, imagine, as you were also mentioning, that the COVID has actually pushed back a lot many girls and women out of the education system, and there is very little chances that they may come back. So in such a case, there should have been greater emphasis on providing this. Another very important dimension, when there is so much of emphasis on research, innovation, and STEM education, there is hardly anything for promoting women's participation either in STEM or research or innovation. That is another component which was kind of missing in the gender budget. So I thought when you spoke about gender not being touched upon by any of the panelists even today, I thought maybe I could just bring some of these elements to light. Thank you very much.
Yeah, our panel is very gender balanced. So we have, but somehow we are getting into a kind of a, in India it happens because, women also take the side of men. And so much of that power equation goes on. Yeah, Saumen, okay. After Saumen, because
No. Let Pratibha come in. No
you
problem.
okay, Pratibha?
Pratibha, please. I don't know why my video is disturbing anyway.
Okay. No, sir. So one thing I can say that, see, we are talking so much about, we have certain targets and goals like sustainable development goals and then national education policy. And if we look at the, and we are so much depending on different kind of index, our scoring. If we look at the SDG index by NITI Aayog, we can see that the goal 4, that is quality education, that is the goal which is performing, which is the most lowest score compared to any other 15 goals that the NITI Aayog is monitoring. And if we look at the indicators, then basically 2-3 things that's the reason behind this low score, and that is mostly at the secondary level, girls education and education of children with or students with disabilities. These are the 2 factors which are responsible for that. Now, again, the gender question is coming. Though our budget
And of
speech.
course, the point that Anuvaji was raising, that gender sensitization, is something, which we really need to look at very critically, both at the universities and the college level, school level. The school level, it didn't exist.
No.
In the university and colleges, it started making some dent, but, thanks to the government, the kind of an institutional change that they really brought in, that it has become so ineffective. So, I mean, in fact, it has to be, that's what I was saying, that, one leads to another.
But the other thing is, like, at the secondary level, the girls are more dependent on government schools, because there is a trade-off within family that if the private schools, then they will send their son. Now, after the COVID, there is a reverse migration, and many of the children are now coming from private schools to government schools. Now, again, that since seats are limited, again, a trade-off has come, that whether the boy will go to the government school, who will going to get the seat. So this has, and the recent, even same thing at the secondary higher education, the recently the released report, All India Survey for Higher Education, there we have seen also the girls enrollment has decreased.
Decline.
Yeah.
Not only they, but several studies have talked about.
Yeah, right. So and the other thing that I wanted to point out here, that we are talking about inclusive education, and but the treatment, we are treating groups as different groups as homogeneous, and though there is so much heterogeneity, but at the same time, like, we are promoting a club residential model schools, which is for tribal children. A residential schools, they are trying to make it at par as the Navodaya Vidyalaya. But at the same time, there is Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalaya, which is also residential, and it is from 1944. And if we look at, think about the per child cost in Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalaya, it's around 18,000 per girl per year, and whereas for Navodaya Vidyalaya, it is 85,000 per girl per child per year. So this much inequity is there in terms of spending, even within government's own school. So whenever we are talking, just to sum up, whenever we are talking about like inclusive education, etc., we need to think about looking at the, I mean, course correction is required, and there is a need for equitable education financing. Otherwise, the inequality will only increase. I mean, we are not going to help much. Thank you.
Yeah, one thing more, which we should not lose sight of, which Anupaji was emphasizing time and again, is कि ये 10,000 टीचरों को जेएनयू वाले बताए कितनों को ट्रेनिंग दिया, तो जेएनयू वाले तो ट्रेनिंग देते ही नहीं, उनको तो बुलाते हैं और उनको भी कहते हैं देखो यही बोलना और ये नहीं बोलना। तो ये भी अब तो अगर जितने भी कोर्सेज होते हैं जहां मुझे बुलाया गया, मैं आपसे शेयर कर रहा हूँ सबों से, तो उनका एक फॉर्मेट है। तो टीचर्स ट्रेनिंग का जो फॉर्मेट है वो टीचरों को कितना एम्पावर करता है ये तो पता ही नहीं चला मुझे, क्योंकि एक कोई मुद्दा होता है जिसपे हमको भाषण देना है और हमको 1,500 रुपए दे देंगे, चलो भाई खाना पूरी हो गई, ऑनलाइन हो गया। तो ये खाना पूरी वाली जो बात है, उससे अकाउंटेबिलिटी आएगी, गवर्नेंस आएगा या नहीं आएगा, या उससे भी आगे बढ़ने की जरूरत है। ये मुद्दा बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है कि हमारा ये इकोनॉमिक सर्वे बहुत सारी बातें कहता है, लेकिन एजुकेशन के चैप्टर में हमने देखने की कोशिश की, हमें किसी ने ये नहीं बताया कि पिछले 3 साल में जो एनईपी के अलग अलग चुनिंदा मुद्दों पे क्या प्रोग्रेस हुआ, क्या एक्सपीरियंसेस क्या हुए। आपने ये जैसे कि आप कह रहे हैं कि साहब कौशल, पीएम कौशल, मेरे 2 विद्यार्थियों ने इसी पे काम किया है और वो ऐसे जगहों पे स्टडी किया है जो कि इंडस्ट्रियल हब्स हैं और बहुत सारे ऐसे, वहां पे तो बहुत ही बुरा हाल दिखा। आईटीआई इसकी स्टडी करी, तो जो ग्राउंड रियलिटी है वो कहाँ तक रिफ्लेक्ट हो रहा है और उसके मुताबिक उसको देखते हुए बजट बन रहा है, या बजट इसलिए बन रहा है कि कुछ पढ़े लिखे लोगों को कुछ चीजें ज्यादा पसंद आती हैं। तो आर वी प्लेइंग टू द गैलरीज और वी आर रियली फंडामेंटली लुकिंग एट the situation on the ground. And that's where, I think what Pratibha, you were saying is, yeah, that's the kind of disparity, how much you spend on. I mean, that's true. I mean, if you look at the expenditure on Navodaya Vidyalaya per child, you look at the expenditure on, say, the Kendriya Vidyalaya per child, you look at the expenditure on, say, government schools, the state government schools, you look at these expenditure, you will find that there is so much of disparity, And that is why I say that, this is a wonderful country where education sector is so much, I mean, we can't call it diverse. It is so unequal that जब कोई ऐसी जरूरत होती है, जब हमारे ड्राइवर का बच्चा हमारे बच्चे के साथ बैठने लगे, तो हम एक नया स्कूल खोल देते हैं. ये हमारा कैरेक्टर. इस बात को हमको समझना पड़ेगा और इसको बहुत गहराई से देखना पड़ेगा. अब मुद्दा ये है कि भाई वो डिजिटाइजेशन से क्या डॉक्टर का बेटा और ड्राइवर का बेटा दोनों को एक ही तरह क्वालिटी ऑफ एजुकेशन मिलेगा? तो अब ये देखने की जरूरत है कि साहब 33% स्कूलों में या 33% लोगों के पास और स्कूलों में इंटरनेट की है. ये यूडैस का डेटा है, ये मैंने कोई इन्वेंट नहीं किया. और जो हमारे बाकी के तमाम सारे मित्र जो प्राइवेट ट्यूशन्स वगैरह, मतलब प्राइवेट सर्वे वगैरह करते रहते हैं या कहीं कहीं हम भी गए हैं, तो और मेरा एक्सपीरियंस, मेरा तजुर्बा हो सकता है, उससे कोई थियरी नहीं बनती, लेकिन ये है कि भाई इंटरनेट की रीच बहुत कम है. जिन गांव में मैं रह रहा था पिछले 6 महीने से, वहां पे 3 स्कूल हैं, उन तीनों में इंटरनेट नहीं है और ये तीनों सरकारी विद्यालय हैं और उस पूरे वैली के सारे बच्चे वहीं आते हैं. तो हम किसकी बात कर रहे हैं? किस डिजिटल एजुकेशन की बात कर रहे हैं? किन क्वालिटी एजुकेशन की बात कर रहे हैं जो कि इस डिजिटल फॉर्मेट के थ्रू, ई पाठशाला के थ्रू. अब मैं तो भूगोल का विद्यार्थी हूं, मैंने भूगोल के कुछ ई पाठशाला के कुछ प्रोग्राम्स देखी हैं, कुछ लेक्चर सुने हैं. मैं इतना कह सकता हूं कि उससे बुरा अगर एजुकेशन के फील्ड में कोई डेवलपमेंट हो सकता है तो शायद मुझे नहीं मालूम. तो अगर ई पाठशाला या हम डिजिटाइजेशन के माध्यम से वही कर रहे हैं जो कि मेरे ख्याल से ट्रेनिंग के बगैर जो हमारे शिक्षक हैं कर रहे हैं, तो इसका क्या मतलब बनता है? तो बहुत सारी चीजों को बहुत गहराई से समझने की जरूरत है. ये और मेरे ख्याल से एजुकेशन हमेशा से एक वो सेगमेंट रहा है जिसने हमारे देश में कम से कम जिसने ये उसके क्लास कैरेक्टर को समझना बहुत जरूरी है. हालांकि उसकी पैदाइश तो कास्ट से हुई है, लेकिन कास्ट और क्लास का जो ये घालमेल है, इसमें से बहुत सारी चीजें निकल के आ रही हैं. तो बहुत सारे लोगों को सवाल पूछने होंगे, लेकिन मेरे ख्याल से एक राउंड हमारे सौमेन दा बोलना चाहेंगे, कुछ और कंट्रीब्यूट करना चाहेंगे. जी.
I would be very brief, just 3 observations, possibly repetitive. Number 1 is that, we are talking about budget. So increase in the allocation of budget, budgetary resources for education is a necessary condition. It's not a sufficient condition. The ground reality was, Professor Sinha was also mentioning, you see, the level playing field does not exist. NEP seeks to construct a market based on ABC. And we can gain from competition. Competition is not the best way to reform our education sector. But given what it is, if the level playing field does not exist, then we cannot gain from competition. And then there are the ground reality. Professor Sinha was also mentioning the political culture, subversion of the education processes are very, very important, right? The second point is about the online education. Digital divide, again, it would be repetitive. Professor Sinha has just mentioned, digital divide will remain because the technology is so fast changing and learning analytics have come to the fore. And we are trying to create a 3D kind of experience within the classroom, so that because of AI, that technology is not given, it's changing so rapidly, and digital divide would therefore remain. It is there and it will remain, it will become more acute. Now, because of online education, we also need to ask the larger question: its impact on learning outcome, its impact on student experiences, teacher-student relationship, access, and quality. What do you mean by quality? So these are very, very large questions that we need to address.
Right.
And the third question is, Pratibha also referred in a first observation, the differentiation within the school system is not desirable, but the differentiation within the higher education system is quite inevitable. So what is happening, this policy, by segregating world-class university from the rest of the universities, central from the state level universities, and public-private divide, and the kind of freedom that we in the public universities should have to discharge our responsibility, higher education system is getting differentiated. Now, the impact would be that enrollment, rise in enrollment and access would be not be very meaningful. That you get the access, you get a certificate, but the brand value will increasingly become important. And it will be more so when the foreign education providers enter. Like Ms. Shahai was also referring to her brief interaction with the, I don't know if it is a brief, UGC chairperson, but we know, I mean, he has been trying very hard to get the universities in the country, but it will only accentuate the differentiation that exists, right? So these are the three observations that I would like to mention. Thank you.
Thank you, Saumen. I understand that you have tried to in fact take the debate at a different level, and you have assumed that there is some kind of architecture behind, and you are fully aware of that architecture, and that's where your reflections were within the framework of that. But I think, as you have rightly said, that, we have to really look at the consequences of this architecture also. So before I come to Dr. Reddy for the second time, there is Rachana Khanna who would like to ask a question. I think, I can see Rachana on the screen if she has a question to ask. Is Rachana around?
Rachna ji, you can unmute and ask.
You can unmute yourself, Rachana. You are muted. Perhaps, she has left waiting for a long time. But I could see that only.
I will try to coordinate. Meanwhile, to Dr. Reddy. Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Reddy. Yeah.
I have a couple of points, Professor. Just one is that the government of India has announced the aspirational districts, 112 districts across the country, which are lagging behind in development point of view. We have to give the more focus on them. Now, recently also, there is, based on the aspirational district, there is an aspirational blocks program, around 500 blocks.
Right. 500 of them.
Yes, 500 of them. So now we're talking about any educational budget you're allocating kind of thing. Is there anything a budget talks about those things? And those are anyhow, you ourselves are identifying these are the aspirational districts to become inspiring others. So where it requires more investment or allocation of the budgets. So I don't see any such thing, specific education budget has been allocated for those blocks or those districts kind of thing. There is one thing. Second thing, the educational financing, that is something talking about, instead of just discussing about what is year-on-year basis, we are discussing about what is the allocation, how much different sectors and kind of thing, but seeing the reformistic perspective. So how educational finance can be re-regulated and bring some reforms here that can have long-term implications, taking the country to new direction kind of thing. That is something one has to throw some light on that. These are the two observations from my side, Professor. Thank you.
So thank you very much. I think, it has been a pretty long debate, over 2 hours, of engagement. And if Anubhaji would like to have the last word, you can take the floor, but very briefly.
Thank you, Professor Sinha, and all the panelists, like all the panelists. I'm really grateful that you have taken this initiative to start this conversation, at least as far as the budget is concerned. And I don't think after all these discussions with our panelists, I don't think that there is anything which is left from my end. And I'm glad that I could also take part in this conversation. And definitely I will spread the word among the various authorities, whatever we have discussed today, and various associations. We will be discussing on all these aspects which we discussed today. And that's all from my side, and good luck to all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's as a person who was chairing, as chair, it's my job to, in fact, summarize the whole debate. And, it's difficult to summarize a 2-hour debate, but nevertheless, I will try in whatever manner that I recall. I think, the panelists are of the opinion that, the school sector and the education sector in general needed a greater push that in terms of the budgetary allocation. And it was all the more required because of the emergency that we had for nearly 2 years, which has impacted among several other sectors, the education sector the most. And, and therefore it needed much greater effort. And that effort is somewhat seen in terms of an increase here and increase there, but not an increase where it was really needed. So that, I think, is one issue that on which, there was a total agreement. The second is that, much of it is really a follow-up of the NEP. But again, something picked up from here and something from there within the NEP, that really creates a kind of a disjointed articulation of this structure. And if you have a disjointed articulation, then much of the essence of this structure collapses, or maybe it really doesn't give you the results the way one would like to have. And so that was second. The third one is that, we really don't need to, and everybody was critical about the fact that, privatization of the kind that is happening would really leave many, a larger segment of our population uneducated. Maybe they would all become dropouts, if not on paper, but in reality. I mean, that's something, which one has to really keep in mind, that, one can be enrolled, but one may not attend. One may attend, but we may not learn. One may learn, but what is that? Which really doesn't take much longer time to unlearn. And unlearning in Indian context is also like lapsing into illiteracy. And that is something, that lapsing into illiteracy is a phenomenon which in fact happens at a much important level, at the level of the gender. And that's where, one has to really put in a lot of effort. And with this process, there are many, many other aspects, which are also attached, like, the gender relation and the gender sensitivity is also very important. The sensitivity towards the fact that, we need to have a plural classroom is also very important. The kind of an experience that India was getting into in the 60s, 70s, and 80s has created most of us who are sitting here, and most of us are products of the government schools. And therefore, in Indian context, is there an alternative, no matter what is the structure that one may really talk about? Can the private sector and the way private sector has been experienced in Indian context is a response to the challenges that we have, or there is there is something, that we got to really probe much deeper in order to find out as to what are the hidden character, what is the hidden aspect, which in fact is not so much getting revealed. On the question of vocationalization, there is an agreement, and absolutely vocational education should have been, Gandhiji talked about बेसिक तालीम की बात की थी उन्होंने, और उनका भी उसी पे, और मेरे ख्याल से हमारे देश में उसको हमने बढ़ावा भी दिया. In fact, there were basic schools and there were rural schools where vocational training was included. Then we had ITIs, which were dedicated towards vocational training, but somehow, they all lost their steam, or they may be the purpose with which, they were created, again, because of the laxity of allocation, because, the technology and allocative mechanisms are so faulty that, in the age of digital times, when we are in the digital time, some of the ITIs were still teaching how to repair a television, which in fact used to operate on a different technology altogether. So this kind of a discordance, which led to decline of the ITIs and the vocational education, is something, which is being brought again into focus. Vocational training is important, and according to the NEP, if it becomes part and parcel of the mainstream education, where you learn certain skills along with other subjects, both in humanities and social sciences, you learn technology, and then you diversify yourself. We don't really need to follow the German model. We can have our own model. And that's something, which is very important. But the German model came in much later, after a very prolonged experience and a large level of educational innovation that they had already arrived at. We haven't yet arrived at that level. And therefore, we have the challenge before us to compete with the world in terms of technology and in terms of innovation. And if we want to be, people talk about Vishwa Guru. I don't agree with this. Everybody is a guru and everybody is a learner at the same time. So, if we want to compete with the rest, and we have the population that is on our side, the demographic dividend has been on our side, but this dividend will very soon become a liability if education remains as iniquitous and as expensive as it is turning out to be. Because then, we will not know as a country as to what to do with our population. The younger ones are there, but they will now fade into oblivion, because they will not have the kind of skill to take advantage of. Southern India has already passed that stage. There is no dividend that their population is going to have. And the North Indian states are entering into a phase where in 3 years' time, this advantage of the demographic dividend would perish. And that is what most of the demographers are talking about, and economic demographers are basically talking about. And the only way you can retrieve that, the only way you can perhaps impact it, is through education. And for that, you need a much larger budget. Monaji was talking about 6%. I think, we have effectively gone down over the years, and from 3.4 or 3.6 to almost about less than 3. We need to really, while the NEP talks about 6% at least, and it is very emphatic in its statement that, the earlier governments could not perhaps reach the 6%. I would rather say that whether this government, which has created this architecture of the NEP 2020, if it's willing, it can. But at the same time, keeping in mind the federal structure of this country, central government allocations is just one part of it. The larger part is with the state governments. That's where the education sector is located. That's where the health sector is located. And therefore, the federal character of education and the federal character of university education will have to be maintained. I think with these words, I'll close the discussion if the organizers are happy with it.
Yes, yes, sir. We will just quickly go for a vote of thanks. Zubia.
And thank you
As
all
we
the
come-
panelists. I enjoyed being with you. It was a lot of education for me.
Zubia, go ahead.
Yes, sir. As we come to the end of today's discussion, I, Subia Moin, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose the formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI Center for ICT for Development for today's deliberation, a panel discussion on education and the Union Budget 2023 to 24. We are grateful to our chair and moderator for today's session, Professor Sachidanand Sinha, and panelists, Professor Mona Khare, Dr. Y. Suresh Reddy, Dr. Pratibha Kundu, Advocate Anubha Srivastava, Sahai, and Professor Saumen Chattopadhyay for taking part in this deliberation and enlightening us. We thank all our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. You may also find more discussions on education in our IMPRI Web Policy Talk series, the State of Education #Education Dialogue, and other thematic series. We are grateful if you are watching us later on our YouTube channel or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk. We also invite you to IMPRI's third annual series of thematic deliberations and analysis of Union Budget, fiscal year 2023 to 24, being organized from February 2 to 7, 2023. Wishing you all a very good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Saumen. Thank you, Pratibha.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good day.